Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We are one day away from the release of the latest book on the Chris Watts case, The Perfect Father, by John Glatt, that's coming out tomorrow on Amazon. As a fellow author, I must say I can't help being curious as to what John Glatt would have focused on in his narrative, what would he have dealt with, bearing in mind he's writing about it 2 years after the fact. So what is there to write about? There is no court case. So in some of the early reporting there is some mention of what the book is about, and we'll deal with that at the end of this episode. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. And let's get started with episode 20 of the Chris Watts phone data review. July 20th was the first time Watts logged onto Snapchat, as far as we know. Snapchat started off as a sexting app. It's primarily used to share photos and videos which disappear shortly after they've been seen. Given Nicole Kessinger's numerous selfies, there's reason to believe she used the app, and that's why Watts was on it at 0200 on a Friday morning. That's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning. On the Crime Rocket blog, crimerocket2.com, I provided a couple of links if you want to read up a little bit more about Snapchat. There are articles like "Do you date on Snapchat?" and "Snapchat finally acknowledges the existence of sexting with memories," and also "The rise of Snapchat from a sexting app by Stanford frat bros to a $3 billion IPO." That's on Business Insider. If you're unfamiliar with Snapchat, you can kind of read up a little bit more about it there. By Friday afternoon, Watts was ready to start wining and dining his mistress and started Googling healthy eateries, breweries, gyms, and tickets for Bandimere Speedway. I'm not sure if Watts went to Bandimere once or twice, but we do know that he Googled tickets twice. The other thing that I want to mention here is what's really interesting is Watts was kind of gravitating towards eating clean, as he put it, eating healthy. And you can see in many of Shanann's Facebook photos the kind of food that she was eating and the kind of food that her children were eating. And you can clearly see that Shanann seemed to quite enjoy pizza. And, well, I'm not going to talk too much about the foods that she preferred, except to say that I think they were incompatible. I think that what Chris Watts wanted to eat and what Shanann wanted to eat were kind of incompatible. And if you think about that, have you ever sort of spent time with a smoker? If you don't smoke and they smoke, and then, you know, one of you wants to be in a non-smoking section, the other one, and what it ends up doing is separating you. You know, the one person's got to leave the room to smoke a cigarette. The one person might leave the room because they don't want to be exposed to the smoking. Personally, I don't really mind it very much. In small amounts. I mean, I really don't mind being in a smoking section. I don't smoke myself, but I'm just saying that heavy smokers and so on, you can kind of have a situation where you're often separated from one another because of zones, right? And something like that can kind of apply to someone eating a certain way as well. Can you imagine if Shanann enthusiastically went along with the way Chris Watts was eating? It's not as though he wanted to eat in an unhealthy way, he wanted to eat in a healthy way. So can you imagine if she sort of went along with it enthusiastically, and Watts felt, wow, this is such a healthy meal. This is because it's quite hard to eat healthy. It takes quite a lot of effort. I think it could have brought them closer together. Also, meals that are healthy tend to require more effort. You need to cook them, you need to buy them, you need to go and buy the ingredients. They often take more time to prepare and more effort to prepare. So who knows, if that area in their marriage had been aligned, they may have actually gotten along better. And I think in the previous episode, actually a photo that Shanann posted of food. Do you think Chris Watts would have eaten that food? On, I think, the 17th of July, Shanann posts a picture of lasagna that actually looks quite good. It looks quite healthy. It's kind of a spinach lasagna with red and white sauce. And there Shanann talks about catching up with her friend Sandra Geronda. And that was at the Vito's Ristorante and Pizzeria. During a meeting with Sandra said to Shanann, "I'm very proud of you." She said, "The lady that you are, and you're a driven spirit. Looking forward to spending more time before you head out to Colorado." On the 20th of July, 2 years ago today, Shanann posted a photo of Cece eating, looked like Cheese Whiz or something, and her brother is sort of tickling Cece. It's kind of another, quite a little intimate portrait of her daughter just relaxing at home in Aberdeen. And so you kind of have two different scenarios going on here. You've got Shanann at home with family, and Chris Watts not quite alone. He's about to have a big weekend with his mistress. He wants to make this weekend count. It's basically the second last weekend. And Shanann's also got a big weekend ahead of her, and their weekends are going to be completely different. Chris Watts is going to do one thing, and Shanann's going to do something else. And that kind of is also illustrative of how different these people are when they're allowed to do what they want to do, when they're left to their own devices in a way. I'm not a millennial, so I can't tell you too much about Snapchat, but I can tell you that the group, Toyopa group Peekaboo, kind of has a relevance in the fact that Peekaboo was Snapchat's original name. The other interesting thing with Snapchat is its logo is like a ghost. And the whole idea is that you send an image and then it instantly disappears. Think about that in the Chris Watts case. This whole idea of something happens and then it disappears. Something happens and then there's no trace of it. So what's interesting to note on July 20th, which as I say was a Friday, is there appears to be no call between Shanann and Watts. In other words, from Shanann to her husband, or from him to her, either in the morning or in the afternoon. So it may be that they argued, or it may be that they sort of resolved, okay, we're going to spend our holiday at Myrtle Beach, great, bye-bye. And then they didn't really need to talk to each other the next day. Or it's also possible that Shanann felt she needed the day to arrange her business for Lavelle. Maybe she said, well, I'm not going to be around, so, something like that. We know that she was going to be quite busy the next day, Saturday, over the weekend. It's not as though Chris Watts didn't have any sort of contact with Shanann, because he kind of indirectly did. At 1709, Watts called Christina Meacham, that's Shanann's friend, and he asked her, do you want me to talk solely about the experience with Burn, or say I've been on Thrive for over 2 years, lost 65 pounds, and then go into the Burn experience? So, irrespective of whether Watts communicated with Shanann or not, here he was communicating with her friend, and he's been kind of set up to kind of promote Thrive for Christina Meacham, for Shanann's friend. And here he's now going to talk about how much weight he's lost, and that's a key aspect on which Thrive sells itself. Thrive kind of promotes itself in large part as a weight loss product. And I think Chris Watts, until he did what he did, he was quite a good spokesman or ambassador for the brand. Of course, he wasn't just using the product, he was also eating well and exercising a lot, and then incentivized by his mistress, incentivized to look good, lose weight. Christina Meacham said, can you talk about your experience with burn? Can you talk about the difference it made and what you have felt? The call starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, it would be interesting if we could see that video, if we could see what Watts said. Because bear in mind, he was ensconced in the affair at this point. Bear in mind, when he made this video, he was about to go off into the sunset with his mistress and have a sort of enjoyable weekend with her. Around about 12 minutes after the call to Christina, Watts searched Google for a CVS pharmacy in Westminster. I think he Googled DC Oaks Brew House and Eatery, the Bandemere ticket office for the NHRA National scheduled for July 21st, and 24-hour fitness locations in Westminster and Thornton. I don't know what that was about. I don't know whether he was thinking about where he was going to move to relative to these fitness locations. Why do you think he wanted to know the locations of 24-hour fitness? As far as I know, that was where Kissinger worked out. It's also possible that he went or wanted to go and work out with her at the gym. Do you think that's possible? Now we're on page 9 of the phone data review, going on to page 10. It's discovery page 2089. At 1812, Watts transferred assorted images of Kissinger, some semi-nude, into his secret calculator application. And they included an image, a selfie of Watts with Kissinger. And there you kind of get a sense of how comfortable they were with one another. And, you know, if you didn't know any better, if you hadn't seen him with Shanann, you would have perhaps thought that they suited one another. Of course, when you see Watts with Shanann, you also get the sense that they suited one another. And the question is, did they? In this respect, Watts seems to be something of a chameleon. He can be a nice guy and the perfect guy to one person, and he can be a nice guy and a perfect guy to another. The fact that Watts transferred a tranche of images of Kissinger into his secret calculator app again on the 20th gives some reinforcement to the notion that at 2 o'clock that morning she may have been sharing private photos on Snapchat with him. When Watts refers to being addicted to Kissinger and her having a leash on him, it seems to be in the sexual arena above all. Now think about what that means when you say, I'm addicted to you. There's a sense of being helpless, of being vulnerable, of being just wanting more, of also not being able to think straight, also of being compromised in a way that, you know, you're not fully in control of your actions. I'm not saying any of this to excuse Watts. I'm not saying any of this to minimize what happened to Shanann or the children. I'm saying it to kind of illustrate how, if you put yourself in Watts' shoes, what the experience was like for him as he gravitated towards increasing criminal psychology. And I think an aspect that is not discussed very often in the Watts case is the sexual aspect. I think what is not acknowledged, and I think it's quite clear why, it's because Shanann is sort of the hero or whatever, and Watts is the bad guy. I'm not saying he's not the bad guy. And Kissinger is also sort of demonized. So it's sort of Shanann is good and the children are good, Watts is bad and Kissinger is evil. Now, I'm not here to argue those points. I'm here to suggest a different way of looking at it. And before you get upset or angry or judgmental or make up your mind, just keep your mind open and allow me to make my point. And this is the point I want to make. I actually made a video yesterday on the Laurie Vallow case, and because I wanted to sort of add value for my patrons, I did some research. I sort of went and I was sort of covering the Dateline documentary, but I wanted to just get some additional material, and I went to Joseph Campbell and just found out a little bit about what he talks about in terms of belief systems and what is the source of belief systems and so on. And although I found tremendous application in what he was saying, specific to the Laurie Vallow case, I ended up thinking about the Chris Watts case. He was talking about things like very symbolic things that are part of Christianity, part of Western culture. He's talking about the duality of especially Western civilization. He's talking about the duality of our beliefs. And when you talk about duality, we mean things that are opposites of one another, things where there are only two versions of one another. So, for example, good, evil, day, night, man, woman, right? Now, we know that although these classic dualities exist, there are also things between them. So, for example, there's another reality beyond day and night, and that reality is the twilight, the sunset, the sunrise, and arguably the dawn and the dusk are some of the nicest times in the day. So, yeah, you are focusing just on day and night. Meanwhile, some of these really romantic and beautiful moments are on the peripheries of these classic ways of seeing, what it is like on the earth. Besides day, night, and twilight, there is also, when you have a solar eclipse, there are also changes in the quality of light of day and night, in terms of you can have a night where the moon is very bright. I won't say it's as bright as day, but it's certainly very, very, very bright. And you also have days that are dark, that are overcast, that are smoggy, that are cloudy and dark, right? There are also days on the poles, North and South Pole, where you can have 6 months of night or 6 months of day, or where the day is barely a glimmer, like a line just on the horizon. What I'm trying to say is there's a whole world beyond day and night if you're willing to look there. In another area, you can talk about male and female. Yes, you get people who are ostensibly male and people who are ostensibly female. Boy, girl, man, woman, he, she. But of course, there are also, how can I put it, there are people that aren't strictly speaking male and aren't strictly speaking female. I don't want to go into this area because it's an area where someone's going to get offended, but for example, Caster Semenya is a South African athlete who wants to be seen as a female athlete. She wants to compete against women, even though she is quite masculine in some ways. She's also married to a woman. Now, I'm not trying to say anything any one way or the other, simply that there's something between men and women. We're all aware of it. There are transgender people, there are homosexual people, there are some people born with both male and female genitals, and so on and so on and so on. And the point I'm trying to make is, when you take this very dualistic view into the Watts case and you say, Chris Watts, bad, Nicole Kessinger, evil, Shanann, good, you miss quite a lot in terms of the middle ground in all of the people. In other words, the human person that is there between all the layers, between that duality. You miss all those pluralities. And you might say, I'm not actually interested, Chris Watts, as far as I'm concerned, is a monster, and there's nothing good about him, and I'm not interested. If that's what you say, that's fine, but then you should go and sit in the corner when I say the rest of what I'm going to say. When you imagine the sexual dimension to the Watts case, and as I say, it's an area people don't think about because they don't want to think about it. They want to think dualistically. When you don't think dualistically and you think about the sexual dimension with Chris Watts, this is what Joseph Campbell was talking about when he said something about what we are all here to do, what we're all about, what everyone is trying to get at on earth each day. Some of us without knowing it, some of us very much conscious of it. But what we're all about is we are trying to find an experience. We're trying to experience the rapture of life. Let me say that again. What all of us are trying to do, and by all of us, that means you and me, it means everyone in the Watts case, Nicole Atkinson, Nicole Kessinger, Chris Watts' parents, Shanann's parents, the siblings, the children, what everybody wants to do, also Dieter, what every living creature wants is to experience rapture. They want the best possible experience of being alive. A puppy wants to go for a walk. A bird wants to have the freedom to fly and to sing and to eat the food that it wants. A plant wants to grow in the shade if that's what it prefers, or in the sun if that's what it prefers. Every living creature's got its own sense of what rapture is to that person. And obviously it is the business of being alive, in the business of being alive, that we are frustrated. Often as children we experience it, and then as adults we get more and more fleeting glimpses of it. It happens less and less often. And as we get older and older, it's less and less and less. But it doesn't need to be that way. When we look at the Watts case, there are two people that are definitely experiencing a kind of a giddy sense of rapture. And they are enjoying being alive. And that is Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger. Now, people don't want to look at that on its own because they see what happens after that. They see the death of those innocent, beautiful, innocent children. They don't want to see that because there's the death of Shanann, who was pregnant, overshadowing all that. But if you imagine that we are in real time, it's now the 20th of July 2018, we are going back in time 2 years ago, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Chris Watts hasn't maybe made up his mind what's going to happen in the future. Shanann doesn't know what's going to happen in her future. The little girls don't know either. The future's not set. Right? And then Chris Watts goes off on his weekend, and part of that experience that just gives him the sense of rapture is sleeping with Kessinger, but it's also just being with her. That is why he feels addicted to her. Being with her is giving him this rapturous sense of being alive. And I'm sure a lot of us have felt that feeling. Some of us have felt it a long time ago. Some of us have experienced it recently. Some of us are experiencing it right now. And those are lucky people. Because when you have that feeling, you want to have it again. And that feeling of addicted is, in this sense, as I say, addicted to the sexual pleasure, the rapture of sex. But there's also the addiction and the rapture of being with someone that makes you feel alive. And sometimes it's not just because someone else is beautiful or someone else is handsome, but because that person, when you're in their company, you feel good being who you are. You feel like this person sees who I am and they like who I am. And then you like who you are around that person. You like who you are. You want to be the best version you can be. You want to be fitter and stronger and more charming and whatever it is. You want to be a better you because it's such a nice feeling being a better version of yourself. And Chris Watts was starting to get addicted to that idea. And so if you say the premeditation wasn't set at this point, how many of these rapturous sexual encounters had to happen for Watts to say, I can't not have this. I can't go without this. I've got to make absolutely sure that this carries on. I can't bear the idea of not being with this person. I can't bear the idea of not having these experiences with this person. I can't bear the idea of going without. Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, if you have this dualistic view and you refuse to acknowledge Watts' humanity, given his inhumane deeds, but nevertheless, if you refuse to acknowledge that, you're not going to understand why this crime happened. You might think the fact that you can't understand and won't understand makes you a really good person. Again, you are subscribing to this dualistic view. If Watts is evil, that must mean you're good. If you can't understand Watts, it must mean because he's evil and you're good. You're too good to be able to understand what he did. You might think that that edifies you and makes you a great person, but it doesn't. It simply makes you ignorant, and it makes you lacking in imagination and not very intuitive and not thinking very far. It makes you ignorant. And I want to challenge you 2 years later to try to push those boundaries, to try and understand other people that are nothing like you. Because people like that exist. People exist out there that are nothing like you, maybe people that you don't like, but they maybe aren't necessarily bad people. And there might also be people out there that are a lot like you, people that you like, but that are criminals or that are horrible people in some way. But no evil person is all evil, and no good person is all good. No one is perfect. We all make mistakes. Not too many of us make the kind of mistakes Watts made, and I'm not sure if I would even use the word mistake to describe the annihilation of a family. Certainly not a mistake. It is, he knew what he was doing. It was a decision. But to go back to the timeline, the lack of data between 0200, 2 o'clock in the morning, and 5 o'clock, including zero contact with or from Shanann, as I say, may indicate an argument or that some critical data was removed on July 20th. That is the sort of missing area. We just don't know. We don't know whether they had an argument or whether there was critical data removed. Now, the fact that Chris Watts spoke to Christina Meacham suggests that despite the argument, if there was one, he was honoring kind of an appointment. I kind of get the feeling that it's once again Watts simply going with the flow so as not to agitate Shanann, so that Shanann's not going to call him and say, why did you not work with Christina? We've got a big Thrive extravaganza tomorrow. We need your support. We need your kind of promotion. Why are you, what is going on with you? Why are you so preoccupied? And you're going to see tomorrow on the 21st how she talks about him playing. All of serious things are happening, but you playing. And he is. Watts his playing at being himself? Watts has got 5 weeks of his life to play at another side of himself. And what I think is really interesting is I think Watts was very happy. I think he was very aware of another dimension to himself and to another woman. And after he got caught and after everything happened, Watts has now reverted to type. Now he writes love letters to his daughters. They read out apparently at his graveside by his mother, and that's supposed to make everything fine. I don't think it does. In fact, I don't understand how that needs to be in a book to say Watts is doing these good gestures to make up for what he did. Nothing's going to make up for what he did. Something like that really should be private, I think, because it's not going to change who Watts is. It's not going to change what he did. And I don't think one should really forgive him for what he did based on him writing letters to his children now. It doesn't really make a difference. To me, what would make a difference is if Watts wrote about what really happened and explained what really happened, and in other words, gave us an insight into his criminal psychology without being gratuitous about it, saying, this is how it happened, this is how I descended into whatever, in an honest way. Not by saying, you know what, I really love Shanann now, I miss her so much. Maybe if that's true, he could say it. But what about his feelings towards Kissinger? How did that change him? In other words, take us through the story from his point of view, how it actually happened. Is he capable of doing that? I don't think he is. I think he's capable of being a two-face. I think he's capable of trying to want you to see the best side of him. In other words, he's stuck in the same duality. He can only be running away from the self that he can't accept in order to try and satisfy people who insist on seeing him as this monster. And so even Chris Watts can't reconcile his own plurality. He can't admit his own criminality because of the way we are as a dualistic society. I'm going to make a comment about America, which maybe Americans won't appreciate, but if you take what Joseph Campbell said and you say, okay, I understand, I see that, I think it's possibly true, so what? So what about dualism, blah, 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 hocus pocus? I don't think so. What I think that duality manifests in America as the sort of two-party state. And right now you've got the Democrats and Republicans at one another's throats, and the country's divided in half. And so if you're talking about duality and you're talking about America, isn't that the problem in America right now? This dual way of seeing things as either black or white, seeing things either as this or that. Isn't there another way of seeing things? And, you know, even if you take Christianity as your example, God is a trinity. God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're three entities. God isn't even a duality. Man is a duality. Man is male and female. That's how he sees himself. But God is a trinity. And wouldn't it be better if people started to think in a third dimension about their reality and about one another? That something's not always just relative to me. There's also God in the world. You know, God made everything, and a snake isn't necessarily a bad thing. God created a snake. A sickness isn't necessarily a bad thing, because a sickness might slow you down and say, you need to slow down, you need to get better. And think about it in Shanann's life. You know, when she was ill, she met Chris Watts, the best thing that had ever happened to her. Was the sickness a bad thing? Was Chris Watts really the best thing that ever happened to her? If you insist on this dual way of looking at things, you get really stuck in your thinking. And you need to try and sort of transcend that. And I hope these episodes are going to encourage you to try that out and think about that. So again, we know that Watts made contact with Christina Meacham to do a Thrive spiel. It's interesting that he did it with her and not with Shanann. Probably it was sort of a pre-planned thing anyway, but this spiel had to have been brokered by Shanann. So obviously it was kind of like doing a favor to Shanann by doing it. In any event, the next day Shanann would show the first obvious signs of networking with Thrivers in North Carolina, this after more than 4 weeks away from Colorado. So I don't know if there are any MLMers on this group. I don't know if there are any MLMers or Thrivers listening, but how long does it take to set up a Thrive event? Does it take 4 weeks, or can it take 1 week? How does it work? In any event, after 4 weeks in Colorado, Shanann kind of has her first event in, I think, Aberdeen, and we'll deal with that in the next episode. conspicuously absent from commenting on these images of Cece that Shanann posted on Facebook with her brother are Chris Watts and his parents. They're not there. Now, it's unlikely any of the Watts family were involved in Shanann's social media at this point. We know Watts subsequently deleted his Facebook profile, so we don't know when he liked something or shared or whatever, but other people on her profile may know and may remember. And if you're watching this, it would be good to know, did Chris Watts comment much on Shanann's social media? What did he say? Or was it very infrequent? It would be good to know. What we do know is that a schism was brewing. Chris Watts would eventually completely delete his social media around about 19 days from now, on the 9th of August, around about there. It's also abundantly clear Watts was looking at and even hoarding digital images throughout this period, just not of his wife and daughters. And I think that's really important to emphasize is while Shanann is putting up photos of her children, of herself, of thrivers, of maybe talking a little bit about her pregnancy, of food that she's eating, Watts is distracted. Watts could look at those images, but he's looking at other images. And you could say, well, if there were no other images to look at, would he maybe look at images of his family? I think the answer is yes. But the fact is there were other images to look at. And what were these images? They were images of another young woman, sometimes partially undressed. And these were reminders of what Watts was doing with this woman and what he was going to do. And although it's not the full story, it was part of how Watts was getting addicted to Kissinger and getting a sense of rapture. And I think any person will agree that when you're in love, sex can be an important part of how you express the rapture of being in love. In other words, without sex, it's quite difficult to necessarily experience the full rapture of love. And of course, the other way around as well. When you're having sex, if you're not in love, you might not feel the full force of the sexual encounter. Not necessarily, but you can sometimes feel this incredible power in the sexual experience when the person you're with, you absolutely feel like you can't do without. You absolutely love everything about them, and you are fully in your skin, experiencing yourself and the other person. And that is the rapture. That's one example of the rapture that Joseph Campbell's talking about. Of course, there are other non-sexual ways of experiencing rapture. You might experience it exercising or eating certain food or looking up at the stars or just in a quiet moment. So there are many different ways of experiencing rapture. You might see it in the way that the sunlight touches the leaves, or the sound of a breeze moving through the curtains or moving through grass. There's so many different ways of experiencing rapture. But clearly, in the sexual sense, that's also a way. Now, again, if you try to remember and reconcile Watts is in an unhappy marriage, he's unhappy. He's not enjoying being a dad. He's not enjoying what he's doing. And then he meets this other woman who offers him freedom to be himself, freedom to enjoy himself sexually. And he really enjoys that. It's kind of, I can compare it to a bird in a cage, and then you open the cage and now the bird flies out. If the bird wasn't in the cage, that enjoyment of flying out wouldn't be that enjoyable. Does that make sense? Okay, and at the beginning of this episode, I promised that I would talk a little bit about the John Glatt book, The Perfect Father. I haven't read it, obviously, but I'm curious to know what's in it. I've got a 12th book, believe it or not, the third book in the Silver Fox trilogy, Post-Truth, that book is sort of scheduled for sometime in the near future. I've already written a framework for that book. I know what I want to touch on. I was also curious to know what John Glatt was going to discuss. If he was going to discuss Chris Watts's personality, it seems as if his book kind of talks a little bit about Cindy Watts and a prisoner that he met, which to me isn't particularly worth responding to. So what is interacting with another prisoner is praying with or for another prisoner. So what? Doesn't really tell us much about the Chris Watts of 2825 Saratoga Trail. I also wonder where everybody else is. We keep hearing from Cindy Watts. We don't seem to hear about anybody from anybody else. Will we? Tomorrow we will continue with the hashtag 2 years ago today Chris Watts timeline. I've already said on this channel that from Friday will really be the last day. Friday this week will be the last day. The 24th will be the last episode really on this channel, and then the series moves to Patreon on the $1 tier. Quite a few people have joined already, some on the $5 tier to take advantage of the audiobooks. Others have joined on the $2 tier to take advantage of the TCRS assessments, the analysis, and some of the other stuff. On the $3 tier are fairly frequent coronavirus diary entries. It's just a little bit of giving you some interesting facts and research, graphs, and information about coronavirus, also from perspectives from other people in the world, just so that we're not completely in the dark about it. And some people are finding it interesting, some people want to get away from it, but some people are finding it certainly an interesting timeline to follow in itself. We're at number 55. It's interesting how the narrative has changed just in 6 months on coronavirus. Should you wear masks? Shouldn't you? And so on. So is this all overblown? Isn't it? Is it going to affect the world? Should it? Will it? And so on. So there's quite interesting debates there going on with people from different countries like Sweden, Australia, Canada, the USA, and the UK. Just getting different perspectives from people who are experiencing all of this in a different way. And I also sometimes provide photos from my neck of the woods. So anyway, let me just invite you again. If you haven't joined Patreon, please do. You can join for as little as $1 a month. This series will be moving to Patreon at the end of the week, and you'll then be able to access it on the $1 tier going up as far as the middle of August. So for a whole 3 weeks, you'll be able to enjoy this series for $1. So head on there for that. I'm not far away from publishing the complete audiobook of Two-Faced Two Pollyannas. That's on the $5 tier on Patreon. The paperback should be available kind of at the end of this week, maybe early next week. So the paperback version of Two-Faced Two Pollyannas, book 3 in the Two-Faced series. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for episode 21 in this series.